together around transportation. And we're really excited to be able to focus these meetings on all of the work that's happening around the State Highway 119 corridor that's such a critical connection between Boulder and Longmont and beyond, and really serving all of the businesses, residents, commuters along this important corridor, and finding ways to support our economic vitality, connectivity, and regional mobility. So like I said, we have a lot to share with you this morning, some amazing presenters from our partner agencies, including RTD, the Colorado Department of Transportation, and the Regional Air Quality Council, and also an update on the first and final mile study for State Highway 119. So lots happening. But before we get started, I just wanted a couple of housekeeping items. If you could add your name and organization into the chat so we know who all has joined us today, that would be great. Also, if people can mute and turn off their cameras during the meeting, that would be great. And then there'll be an opportunity for a question and answer for each of the presentations. And so if you can put your questions in the chat, we'll try to get to as many as we can. If we can't get to all of them today, we'll be glad to answer your questions and send them out with the follow-up information. We're also recording this event so that it's available online and people can learn this information even if they can't join us virtually this morning. So again, thank you so much for being here this morning and all of your support to Commuting Solutions. I want to highlight a few of our gold sponsors for Commuting Solutions, including the Colorado High Performance Transportation Enterprise, Elevations Credit Union, the Northwest Chamber Alliance, Google, and the Regional Transportation District. So a lot of great partners bring us together for our work in Commuting Solutions. Many of our other sponsors are included in the slideshow that you were just seeing. And again, thank you for everyone's support and for all of the membership in Commuting Solutions. If you are new to Commuting Solutions, we want to say an extra special welcome to you this morning. And Commuting Solutions is a nonprofit organization that serves as the transportation management organization for the Northwest Metro region. Commuting Solutions, as I said, has been in place for over 20 years and brings together the public, private, and nonprofit sectors to work together around transportation. And Commuting Solutions is also a proud member of the DRCOG, or Denver Regional Council of Governments, Way to Go Regional Transportation Demand Management Program. So lots of connections and lots of partnerships to bring this forward today. And so I want to go ahead and get us started. It's a really exciting time to be working in transportation. There's a lot of momentum building for different opportunities at the local level, the state level, and nationally. So Commuting Solutions is an important participant in all of those conversations that are happening. We are keeping our fingers crossed that there will be a state transportation funding bill introduced, and look forward to conversations around that and how it can help support advancing CDOT's 10-year pipeline of projects, which includes the State Highway 119 corridor, as well as other very important regional corridor projects throughout the metro area and the Northwest region. So we encourage you to please stay in touch with Commuting Solutions, stay involved, reach out to Audrey or any of us that are on the board, and we would be glad to talk with you more about Commuting Solutions. But with that, I'd like to get our program underway this morning, and I have the privilege to introduce our first guests who are with us this morning from RTD. We have our RTD board directors, Lynn Geisinger and Eric Davidson, who are joining us this morning, along with RTD staff, Chris Quinn. So I will go ahead and hand it off to them so they can share all of the exciting news that's happening with RTD and help us learn more about the priorities that are underway there. So I'll turn it over to Lynn, Eric, and Chris. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay, sorry, I've been having some technology issues, and when I go to start my video, it says you can't start your video because the host has stopped it. So hopefully you can hear me okay, and I'll go without video for the moment. But this is Eric Davidson speaking. I am the, oh, there we go. Look at that. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So I am the newbie on the board. I know I've met many of you here, but to some of you, I'm probably a new face. I am the director on the board of directors at RTD for District I, which is Longmont and Broomfield, Lafayette, Erie, part of Thornton, and then some of the unincorporated Adams and Boulder County areas. And it's been an exciting couple of months. It's been busy. I can't believe it's only been 2 months since I've been on the job. But it's an exciting time at RTD in terms of change. Certainly, we're in a difficult time right now, recovering from the pandemic. There are a number of financial challenges, some of which, we'll kind of be talking a little bit about today, and certainly a lot of ridership challenges as well. But something that I think is very exciting for me coming on the board at this time, our board of directors, as I think everyone is aware, made a very important and a very big and significant change prior to my coming on board, which is the change of our CEO and general manager and bringing in Deborah Johnson. And in the time that I've been here, the short 2 months, I can say that Deborah Johnson is a very exciting leader. She is a collaborator. She's very detail oriented. She's an operator. She's demanding, but she's fair. I can see that she's taking this organization into a very positive direction. With that being said, we have a number of areas that we're looking at in terms of change right now. Again, we'll discuss some of those, but one of the things that I have seen is an immediate change in the culture around collaboration here at RTD. I've seen that Ms. Johnson has gotten involved in very detailed issues like dealing with contractors and vendors not getting paid who have reached out to board members, getting involved in specific IGAs that have gotten jammed in our systems. She really is willing to roll up her sleeves and get deeper involved. And I expect that the RTD as an organization will have an increased collaboration with our stakeholders and with our community members moving forward. As I mentioned, we're still struggling with ridership. I know that Director Geisinger will be speaking shortly about some of the federal relief money that we've brought in here and how we're looking to restore some of our service. I'm excited to be here. We have a number of updates that we'll talk about, and Director Geisinger will go a little bit back and forth here through. So I'll hand off the floor to Director Geisinger. It's nice to meet you all, and certainly very nice to be here.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is.
Yeah, take it away, Lynn.
Hi, I'm Lynn Geisinger. I have been on the board 2 years, so it really feels like it's been a while. I hear two things all the time from people. I heard them again last night. One is, when am I getting my train? And the other is, you really picked a great time to go on the RTD board. So it looks like my video is not working either, but you can look at Kathleen, I guess, and, and listen to me. I will second some of the comments from Eric. I think one of the big things I've been working on since I got on the board is good governance. RTD, I really believe, started to really lose its brand. It became kind of known as the agency of no. A lot of inflexibility. Decisions were made, service decisions and other decisions, and then brought to our local governments for comment. And it's just not the way that we needed to be going to rebuild trust. And so a lot of what I've been working on is in trying to rebuild some of that trust. I chair the Communications and Government Relations Committee, been working with the legislature and other local government and other people and working internally. We, as Eric said, I think the best decision we've made was bringing in Deborah Johnson. I believe we have the right person in the right chair right now. We're hiring a new CFO. She's working hard to rebuild trust. She's very experienced, came out of Washington Metro, LA Metro, San Francisco Transit, and just has a lot of good ideas. One thing that she started that many of you, those of you who are involved in some of the transportation planning, maybe were involved with was starting the process of thinking about service changes with stakeholder meetings to talk about what's important to you, Boulder County, what's important to you, Boulder, to Longmont, to Louisville, some of our other cities, and all around the district. The staff went out to listen first. And I heard Ms. Johnson speaking yesterday that this needs to be, as she referred to it, an evergreen process, but something that is continuing along the way. So that's, I think, important. And as Eric said, one of our biggest challenges right now, as you can imagine, is bringing back ridership. Ridership dropped about 75%. It's back up to about 60% of its pre-COVID numbers. And of course, you know, getting vaccinated should help, but we don't really have any idea what it will take to bring back ridership, lure new riders, all of those things. RTD has been very fortunate in that it got CARES Act funding, $232 million, and then another $203 million in the recent CRISA funding. And that funding is intended to go to payroll and operations. And by and large, that's where it's going. We were able to bring back all of our full-time and part-time frontline workers. About 180 million of the CRISA funding will go toward the next 6 service changes, the run boards, as we call them. So it means in June, and then for the 2 following years, about 30 million. And that will cover the losses of not having the ridership, the money that we would ordinarily bring in, and the lowered sales and use tax. But it also should give us money to really start bringing back service. I think a lot of us, including our new GM, really believe we need to try some new things to bring people back. A pilot with lower fares, and changes to the low-income pass program, changes to the other pass programs to make them more relevant during the post-COVID period. And then, of course, funding to bring back service. So those are a lot of the pieces that we're all working on and that I'm working on. And we'll be talking about some other things here in the near future. Eric and I are going to talk a little bit about Northwest Rail and some of the other projects we're working on. And then Chris Quinn, who is our resident expert on 119, will give just a brief update on RTD's 119 status before we get a longer update from CDOT. So Eric, your turn.
Sure. Yeah. So obviously Northwest Rail has been a pretty hot topic recently. I know it always is, but with some of the comments that have been made across, the elected officials and with our CEO and general manager, it's been in the news quite a bit. I know both Lynn and I hear a lot from constituents and from stakeholders on this. We did have a study session on February 9th. It was an excellent study session. We got a deep dive for the board, which is a relatively new board. We have quite a few that came in 2 years ago and a number of us that came in 2 months ago. So we had a nice deep dive on the history of Northwest Rail, how we got to where we are, what the financial situation is, what the issues have been. I think, one of the big takeaways that I've had in looking at this is in 2019, before the pandemic, we had the idea of looking at a peak service plan, a starter plan for morning and evening hours. And there was, at the time, we didn't really have a good handle on the cost of a peak service plan. We had been considering the full service, and an estimate was put out of $710 to $800 million would be the cost of providing that peak service. But in 2019, we did deem that to be a conservative estimate. There were a number of unknowns. More than half the cost of that service, in fact, would be the BNSF costs that would require us to take a few additional steps with BNSF to actually nail down. So that's obviously a big unknown. And then there were some other unknowns dealing with, exactly which sidings would be required. We would be sharing track with a freight train. So, how those operations would work would need to be ironed out. There were a number of costs that we were unsure of, just even in terms of economies of scale of ordering fewer trains rather than the full number we would have for full service. So, that was one thing that came out, and Director Geisinger and I have been, asking to look at those and at least answer the big questions to really nail down what the cost might be. The estimates in terms of the taxes that have been collected from Northwest rail communities range. $386 million is the most recent I've seen from the most impacted communities, and $124 million is what is in our Fast Tracks internal savings account. So, you know, obviously if peak service is a $700 million plan, or our full service is a $1.5 billion number, we're in a tricky spot. But we did get a chance not just to look at where we are, but also to hear more about some of the potential partnerships. Amtrak has taken an interest in the corridor. I think many of us have heard that, and is considering running service from Pueblo to Fort Collins. They would require an operational partner. This is a long shot, but while we have all the energy that we have right now, and while everybody is paying attention and looking at this, we could, you know, certainly use to channel that energy and see what we might be able to motivate with partners. So we are expecting to hear a proposal from Ms. Johnson and from RTD staff members on where we go from here, and that would be coming sometime in April. And Lynn, I'll hand off to you. Maybe you have more to add to that, and I'll hand it off to you.
Sure, just a little. The board at the end of the study session asked our general manager and her staff to come back in the next 60 days with a proposal to update the 30% design work that was done in 2011. That was done in conjunction with BNSF. It looked only at the full service plan. There was no process for looking at the idea of the peak service plan had not come up at that point. So this update would be designed to update both to some degree, but largely to look at the peak service plan. And we really need to have new numbers. We need to have numbers that people agree on. It needs to be a very transparent, collaborative process to get to facts that we all agree on. We need to know, you know, the ridership projections, the current ridership projections for both, well, for the full service plan are about half of what they were in 2004, and the ridership projections for the peak service plan are, you know, 800 to 1,400 people or boardings per day. They're pretty low. And Eric and I have been advocating hard, and I think the board will support that design update. So we get those numbers, we get information about the impacts on the communities and what else we need to do. One thing that I learned from Chris Quinn just recently is that the full service plan will require a full double track corridor the whole way. So that's a huge expense. The peak plan would not require that. We could share the track, although it would require double tracking a number of places for passing areas or sidings. So still quite a bit of expense there. We have to add signalization, positive train control, which stops the train automatically in certain situations and those sorts of things. But I do believe that the board is leaning towards moving forward on some sort of review and update of the design work and also of the environmental work. And we'll be deciding that probably in April. The funding will come from FISA. I expect it will cost somewhere between $2 and $5 million. And we're looking forward to getting those numbers. Thanks.
And so I guess another thing that's important and going on here at RTD, we have restarted the Reimagine RTD process, which I'm very glad to see that we've done that. We will be coming out of this crisis, and it's an important time to define who we want to be going forward. And so where we are right now is we're reconvening. The technical working group will be meeting very soon. I'm very happy I'll be a part of this process. Right now, the board was presented about a week ago, I believe, with the new, the revised and revisiting our guiding principles. And what we're doing is really nailing down those guiding principles, which are high-level aspirational, who we want to be and what we want to focus on. And then what we'll be working on with the technical working group, we'll be getting into the strategies. How do we actually start thinking about implementing things to achieve those higher level goals? Some of the goals, the guiding principles are mobility, equity, financial, partnerships, workforce, and sustainability. And just, briefly touching on those, mobility is about how we provide safe and reliable transportation and focus on what we're here to do, which is moving people. Equity, we actually have had some exciting updates in just even how that's already starting to impact us that I think Lynn will touch on with TOD. But this is looking at, what are all the ways that we remove the barriers to ride our system and move. Financial is one that, certainly has my attention at the moment. We do have some big financial challenges at RTD, and we need to take a good hard look at our long term and how we make sure that our organization is set up for success well into the future. Partnerships is what I mentioned before. We do want to bring about more of a spirit of collaboration. Our workforce, this has been a challenge pre-pandemic in terms of addressing operator shortages and employee shortages. We have some big work to do there. And then sustainability, we're here in Colorado and a fire state, and all, I think, very motivated to do what's right for our environment, which is what's right for all of us that are living here. So certainly excited to get that moving again. I've seen some interesting ideas already thrown out from strategies of how we're going to do new things to achieve those goals. So more will be coming out on that soon. Slightly related, we also have an APTA peer review happening where we have some of our peers, and it is a group of superstars from what I've seen so far, taking a look at RTD and taking a look at how we compare to other transit organizations, where we do well, and then shining a light on where we have opportunities to do better. Already there's some interesting discussions around security. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think we're going to get some recommendations that will be extremely helpful on that front. There's a great deal that we'll be doing in terms of looking at how we audit ourselves, how we take a look at ourselves. And I think this peer review with APTA is a great first step, and certainly something that Ms. Johnson has brought us the excellent contacts from all of her experience to really make this an effective process. So with that, Lynn, I'll hand off to you for some other topics here.
Great. I wanted to talk for just a minute about the Accountability Committee. Many of you probably read that the board worked with the governor and the transportation chairs in the legislature last year to appoint an accountability committee. It's 11, I think it's 11 experts in various areas from around the district. It's a little daunting to be on an elected board when this is first appointed, although I was pretty involved in putting it together. I think it's a good thing to have, and I think it's very freeing to be able to go into these meetings with new leadership and be able to say we share a lot of your concerns and your priorities. And I think that's the point that we are at now. The Accountability Committee, I'll mention just a few things that they're working on that I think are significant to our region. They proposed a bill that was introduced in the legislature last week that is intended to loosen certain restrictions in the RTD statute, including replacing some old fare recovery requirements with more significant requirements around reporting operating costs and operating costs divided by ridership. It also allows RTD to charge for parking and makes it easier in terms of some of the parking requirements to promote transit-oriented development. So some of those things will be helpful. Some of the other issues they're looking at now that I think are important for our area are that they're looking at partnerships and encouraging those and how to encourage those. They had a very good program on partnerships with Boulder County, Denver, VIA, and several others. And the board and our new GM, I believe, are moving the same direction in terms of really developing more structures to encourage these partnerships. The governor charged the committee with addressing Northwest Rail, so they've started that discussion, and hopefully we'll be able to give some helpful advice on that issue. They're also considering creating local sub-regional forums. And the problem there, again, is the perception and often the reality in the past that RTD makes service and other decisions and then comes in asking for suggestions. And starting with the stakeholder meetings we had a couple of weeks ago, I believe the agency is moving the same direction that the Accountability Committee is moving, whether it's sub-regional forums or just regular partners. It's to get a more collegial engagement approach. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention, is separate from the Accountability Committee, is that a couple of weeks ago, the staff brought the board an equitable transit-oriented development plan. and a policy that would set a goal of 35% of transit-oriented development should be saved for affordable housing. And also we approved tools, for instance, around parking and some of those things that will help us achieve that goal. So we're moving, I think, in with that and with work we're doing on updating a sustainability policy, working towards action on electrification. I don't want to overstate all of these things. You know, Eric and I are kind of excited because we're seeing a lot of good change, and I'm sure there will be bumps in the road along the way, but there are some good things happening.
Great. Yeah, thanks. I would echo that. Yeah, thanks, Lynn. It's definitely exciting that there are some changes and a culture around that, but certainly a lot of challenges ahead. So definitely don't want to overstate where we are here. We have a lot to get through, and case in point, that CRISA funding really is relief funding. I mean, it's helping smooth things out, make sure that we don't hit the brink. And so, nothing at this point is a free pass. We've got a lot of challenges. The final thing I wanted to talk about, and then I will hand off to Chris Quinn here for some of the 119 topics. One thing that's been really important to me getting on this board prior to being on, and then continuing to see this, the relationship between RTD and the local communities was, I would say, broken. And this isn't necessarily something that's been done by one party or the other. This is, we're a 2,300 square mile area. It's hard to do all things. It's hard to be all things to all people. And, for a number of reasons, I think we've had a lot of areas we've drifted apart. Recently, we had I think a nice first step in the direction of repairing some of that and doing some listening workshops as it relates to our service changes. And we'll be seeing this tonight at the board meeting, looking at some of the service changes. And we did give an opportunity for stakeholders to weigh in. I think we need to do that earlier. This has been something that's been really important to me, is to increase that communication and that dialogue. I have heard from a number of people, constituents, transportation managers, and mayors about just the need to be able to get together and talk earlier. So I'm working on a few things right now in conjunction with, really just having the opportunity to listen to the good ideas of some of our great minds in transportation. I just have the benefit of hearing from folks about what problems we're running into. And I think, in collaboration with our cities, we're going to have some new ideas, some new concepts for meetings coming up here. So we'll certainly keep you all posted on that. I think that especially as we get out of 2021 and into 2022, we should have a much better rhythm of earlier and more often communication. For me, a lot of it is about shared vision, is making sure that we're all moving in the same direction and going after the same things and using our strengths. So with that, I'm going to just again say thank you for having me here, and thank you for the opportunity. It's been a wild couple months, and I'm sure it will be a wild couple years, but I'm glad to be here. And Chris, I'll hand off to you to talk about some of the 119 items, which is certainly, again, one of the exciting things we have going on here.
Thank you. Good morning. This is Chris Quinn. I'm a planning project manager with RTD. And later on in the meeting, Adnana Murdic with CDOT, who is the project manager for State Highway 119 on the CDOT side, will be giving you an update. So I'll reserve most of the news on the status of the project. I will allow her to be the ones to deliver that. But what I did want to note from the RTD end is that currently we have, and this has been an important piece that we're trying to make sure stays afloat. We do have a slightly north of $30 million allocated for the corridor. In our previous mid-range financial plan, we had that money there. And then as part of our budgeting process, we are just now submitting our project submittals for that. So we have requested that 30+ million remain in the RTD budget. And that we have also requested that $5 million of that funding be accelerated to next year, as opposed to 2023, when the remainder would be available, so that if there's any early action items we can start taking on the corridor, we can do those. One of the things I do want to emphasize is the fact that right now we along with CDOT, the Denver Regional Council of Governments, and the local governments, have been trying to kind of cobble together a funding plan for the corridor. And very similar to US 36, which I think is a pretty good model, at the beginning of the project, we did not have nearly enough money to construct the project. But by getting little pieces, little pots of funding here and there, we were able to leverage those funds into some bigger federal grants and make the project a reality. So we're hoping that as money starts to trickle in, we can build on that. And, as soon as we're ready with design, we're going to hope ready to have a project. So that's all I have. And I know Adnana will be providing a more detailed update on where we are with the project design in just a few minutes. So thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. That was a perfect lead-in. Adnana Murtek from CDOT is our next speaker, but before we transition, I want to say thank you so much to Lynn, to Eric, for your leadership. We are so glad that you are on the board and helping to steer us through these challenging times, and really excited about the opportunities ahead, the new leadership that Deborah Johnson's bringing to RTD, and really this emphasis around early and often collaboration and partnerships. It's just music to our ears, and we're so thankful for all of your work and your leadership to make this happen, and Chris, for all of your years of working with us at the local level. So Commuting Solutions stands ready to continue partnering with you all and with the local communities and the business community to make these advances happen and bring this to life. So thank you for being here today. And now I'll turn it over to Adnana Murtek from CDOT, and she is the project manager for the CDOT State Highway 119 project. We really appreciate all of Adnana's work and keeping the momentum going along 119, and again, bringing together all of our local communities and RTD and CDOT to work together to advance the 119 corridor, which is the #1 priority for our Northwest Mobility Study process. And so, Chris, you mentioned it, it's all about readiness. And so all of this work that we're doing together today is about getting the project ready and to be well poised for future funding opportunities. So with that, Adnana, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kathleen. And thank you, Chris, for the great news and RTD team. That's very exciting. I absolutely agree with that. So again, my name is Adnana Murtic. I'm a project manager for the State Highway 119 Mobility and Safety Improvements project that CDOT is currently working on in partnership with RTD. And I just want to start real quick just to go back and revisit that history of this project. So basically RTD and Northwest area stakeholders identified this corridor as a top candidate for future bus rapid transit or BRT through Northwest area mobility study completed in 2014, and RTD PEL was completed in 2019, and includes the vision for State Highway 119, and main parts of that are regional BRT, managed express lane, and commuter bikeway, I'm sorry. CDOT goals. So going into this project, we want to focus on goals that would basically define and summarize all benefits and value for this corridor. So CDOT's vision, along with its stakeholders, is first of all, maintain improved safety in accordance with state and local safety plans, such as Vision Zero goals, for example, maximize operational efficiency at the intersection level, as well as operational efficiency at the level of the whole corridor, and maximize person throughput for all modes of transportation, minimize transit travel time and maximize ridership, and improve bicycle and pedestrian connectivity to existing and future infrastructure, and all of that doing while minimizing impact to travelers and nearby communities. So right now we will, what's happening, so we will take into consideration the traffic alternatives analysis study that is recommendations that HPT is working on right now, and first results of that study, first set of recommendations should be available to us in April-May timeframe for State Highway 119 and State Highway 52 intersection. And our next step after that is full set of recommendations for the whole corridor, and those we're expecting to have by late summer of this year. Transit facilities will include bus stops, park and ride, as well as connections to and from those facilities for bicycle and pedestrians. And then, as we know, Commuting Solutions is working on first and final mile study right now. So we are hoping to look at those recommendations and hopefully incorporate them into our design as our budget allows. The PL provided table shown on this slide with the breakdown cost estimate for all project elements included in that vision for the corridor. So now our objective is to look at those recommendations of the traffic alternatives analysis study, use the funds that have been identified to determine phased improvements for implementation, while working at the same time further to achieve that final vision for the corridor. So CDOT has identified a total of $40 million, of which 30 million would come from Senate Bill 267 and 10 million from Senate Bill 1 transit funding for this project. And in addition, as we already heard, RTD has budgeted 30 million to be available hopefully soon, that we can work more and further into the transit station vehicles and other system equipment for the BRT service. So what we're doing right now, so we're really pleased to announce, first of all, that we have selected our consultant, and that's Miller Engineering. Really happy to work with them. And we have already made significant progress since their contract execution in their first task order, and working already on survey in the corridor, for example, is already well in progress. And then SUE investigation is also coming soon. And then we have also started on some of the environmental data collection. And the whole team is continuing to ramp up the design efforts and progress elements that really aren't contingent right now on the traffic study. And for example, we're looking into ITS design for the main line and working on that coordination with RTD for BRT station and shelter concept design. And of course, as I mentioned, State Highway 119 and State Highway 52 intersection recommendations are expected in April of this year, and we're planning and hoping to start the preliminary design right after that, maybe in May of this year. And then the rest of the corridor design should start again after we receive the final document, the final set of recommendations later in the summer of this year. In addition, these efforts will need to be closely coordinated with the stakeholders in the corridor. Our close coordination with Boulder County Bikeway Design Project is really a great opportunity to join our forces and deliver a good product that will bring us closer to all of our goals and our vision in this corridor. And we also continue our coordination with all other stakeholders in the corridor, like City of Longmont, City of Boulder, Commuting Solutions, and all their respective projects. So yeah, that is basically really quick update for this project, and really happy to be with all of you here today. Appreciate it. And this is my contact information. If you have any questions or if you want to just chat about the project, I will be happy to answer any questions that you might have. So thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Adana. Great presentation and a lot to cover. There's so many pieces of the puzzle to bring forward the vision for the 119 corridor, and it's great to all be working together with CDOT and all of the stakeholders along the corridor. We did have one question that came in the chat around the speed of the traffic along the corridor, and I don't know if we're kind of running a little bit behind schedule, but I don't know if it would be okay to take one quick question. It said the speeds along 119 are very high. And the signs indicating the speed limit are buried. What could be done to better highlight the change in speed? And again, this might be something that we could talk about more through the ongoing stakeholder involvement.
Probably, and then that's definitely a good question. And I think all the elements that I was talking about need to work together. So looking at those and incorporating safety, first of all, would be our main goal. So I think once when we get there, and then when we take into consideration all the recommendations and all what needs to be done in connections with pedestrians, I'm sure we will be able to address that as well.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much. If people have other questions around the design for 119, feel free to put them in the chat and we can follow up on those. But I'd like to introduce our, again, thank you, Adnana, and I'd like to move on and introduce our next presenter, who is Kay Kelly with the Colorado Department of Transportation. She is the Director of the Office of Innovation and Mobility. So we're so excited that Kay is joining us today to talk more about the future opportunities to enhance transit and really innovative transit along the I-25 corridor and how that could integrate with the plans for bus rapid transit and high quality transit along the 119 corridor. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kay to share more information with us. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Kathleen. Yeah, so thank you again for the opportunity to speak today. For those that I haven't had the pleasure to meet yet, as Kathleen said, I lead the Office of Innovative Mobility, and it's one of the newer groups at CDOT, but really it includes the Division of Transit and Rail, along with our vehicle electrification work, our connected and automated vehicle work, and mobility projects, both in that kind of traditional transportation demand management space, along with some of the new and emerging modes like micromobility and stuff. So really exciting area. And I think a lot of the things that my group does, they come together in this mobility hub concept that I'm going to talk about today. So really thinking about how we can reimagine getting people from place to place. Right now that default option is really, people get in their gasoline powered cars and drive where they want to go. But, there are a lot more options out there that we're working to make more visible, more convenient, more safe, more accessible statewide. So next slide. So CDOT, if you don't know, operates a statewide transit service, our Mustang and Outrider service, which serves all the routes you see here. This is an interregional service, and these routes connect in with local areas that are served by transit agencies like RTD, our rural and mountain transit agencies as well. And next slide. While we're still talking about buses currently, there are some very cool and high-tech concepts out there for what today's buses might look like in the future. Really not your grandmother's bus that we're talking about, but some really interesting design concepts, the ability to move to zero-emission powertrains. So just a vision of what we might see rolling down our roads at some point in the future. So next slide. On top of the vehicles themselves, we're also reimagining traditional bus stops and park and rides to serve as more than just a place to get on the bus, but really is that epicenter of mobility for a community. This is again important because we know that we need to get people out of the habit of taking their personal vehicle, which is again often a single occupant vehicle. That's going to help us reduce vehicle miles traveled to achieve our greenhouse gas goals, to address ozone. Not to mention reducing congestion and wear and tear on the roads as well. So the vision is that these mobility hubs will be highly multimodal places with a variety of options, pedestrian and bike access, electric vehicle charging, bike and car share, transportation network company pickup and drop off zones, connections again into those local transit providers, connections to passenger rail service where that's available in the state. And with our Connected Colorado effort, the ability for your cell phone to be your ticket. If you can get to one of these mobility hubs and you have a cell phone, we can do that coordinated trip planning and ticketing to get you anywhere you need to go in the state. Which, on top of the kind of environmental and congestion and air quality benefits, really as well has some equity benefits as well for folks who don't own vehicles or who have trouble getting from place to place due to disabilities or things. So really just an interesting way and an exciting way to bring a lot of things together to improve mobility for all citizens in the state. Next slide. So when we're talking about mobility hubs for interregional travel, we know that travelers, want that truly express service in order for it to actually compete with the travel time of driving. So for that reason, we're going to be looking at traveling in managed lanes wherever possible, not taking huge detours off the highway to get to stations, not stopping at every exit. The plan is to keep the stops about 10 miles apart, again, to maintain that travel time advantage over a personal vehicle that would be traveling in a general purpose lane. The stations are going to have amenities that make them more of an elevated feel, more like what you would think of for a rail station. And then, of course, the vehicles themselves offering amenities like Wi-Fi that let you get work done while you're traveling, or maybe even enjoy some leisure time. Maybe you can watch a movie instead of watching the roads. And the goal is to have the boardings occur in that center lane to avoid having that vehicle have to merge across multiple lanes of traffic to get on and off the highway at the stops. Next slide. Not all mobility hubs will look the same or have the same amenities. These are some of the things that we envision stops having, but local communities are going to play a big role in choosing the amenities that best fit their location. As you can see, we're thinking about things like options for pedestrians and cyclists. Again, those connections to the local bus networks, PNC pickup and drop off areas, opportunities for car sharing, electric vehicle charging, along with kind of all the other safety, comfort, and convenience amenities that you might expect, restrooms, informational signage, emergency phones, things like that. So just kind of a menu of options of things that you might see at a mobility hub. Next slide. We're also thinking about mobility hubs being in these kind of small, medium, large categories based on a lot of factors, the size of the area it serves, the transportation needs that specific community has. A larger city with more density, more travel demand is likely to have a larger mobility hub. And of course, the costs are going to scale based on the number and types of amenities that a community would include in their mobility hub, along with also the degree to which they're incorporating aesthetic elements like landscaping and artwork, which can tend to increase the price of a station substantially. And then, of course, the existing site conditions also play a role. If we're starting from scratch in an open field, it's likely to cost more than if we're adding on to an existing location. Similarly, with that small, medium, large segmentation, there's also the ability to kind of start with something small and functional that fits the budget now, but could expand in the future as funds are available or as development crops up near that location that increases transit demand and necessitates some of these other amenities as well. So just kind of a range of costs roughly grouped into a small, medium, large category. Next slide. We've been working on this concept along I-25 from Fort Collins to Pueblo. We have 18 mobility hubs planned. 4 of those are already in operation. 2 of them are under construction, and there are 5 in the planning stages, including the mobility hub at Colorado 119 and I-25. So next slide. So in order to fulfill kind of this mobility vision for that north-south I-25 corridor, we're kind of thinking of this as the spine that other things would connect into. There are a few major cost elements. First of all, the vehicles. We're providing daily service along the I-25 corridor already with Mustang. It's mostly during the rush hour and the peak commuting periods. We do envision needing to provide additional trips during the rush hour to serve more commuters, along with regular services throughout the day to really make this behavior change easy for travelers and something that they can depend on. You know, they don't necessarily have to work a 9 or a 10-hour day to ride the bus. They could go down to, get to downtown in the middle of the day, or use it to get to the airport or something like that, and not just have it during the commuting times. In order to do that and expand that service, we need to expand our vehicle fleet, of course. We're interested in issuing an RFP to solicit some innovative ideas for how to design the vehicles to really, make them more exciting than that traditional bus. We also want to be transitioning from traditional powertrains. Most of our buses right now are running on diesel fuel, and we'd want to transition those to zero-emission vehicles to be in keeping with the state greenhouse gas roadmap. And we also need to do some analysis studies to make sure that we're planning appropriately for the fueling and charging infrastructure that'll be needed in order to facilitate those vehicle movements once we're using those battery or hydrogen powertrains or whatever they may be. So, and then of course there's ongoing maintenance and operation costs for a fleet of vehicles. The second part of the cost is really the mobility hubs. This is a bit of a back of the envelope calculation for how many of each level of mobility hub we think we still need to support along the route. These funds are largely coming from SB 267 along with local match, and the locations and projects here are also part of the 10-year plan for CDOT. And then finally, really, in order to realize that vision of separating this service from the general purpose lanes, we also know that we need to be building out the express lane network along I-25, which has a cost associated with it as well. I know this group is particularly interested in the 119 corridor and the mobility hub that we're planning there. So I invited Sharon Terranova from the Division of Transit and Rail, who's leading our mobility hub work, to get into more of the details of that 119 location. So I'll let her take a few slides from here. Sharon, are you there?
I am. Thanks, Kay.
All right. Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you. If we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so as Kay mentioned, we are building out our mobility hub network on the I-25 corridor. I'm focusing right now on the North I-25 corridor, and where we are doing managed lanes projects in segments 6, 5, 6, 7, and 8. We are building center median stations at Centera Loveland and also at Berthoud. But for the segment 4 managed lanes, that there is no funding identified for that project right now. So we are choosing to activate our Mustang service at our at our Firestone carpool lot, which is at I-25 and State Highway 119 on the southeast quadrant. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is the location of our interim, we'll call it, our phase 1 mobility hub for Firestone and Longmont. And right now you can see on this the carpool lot. And we are, if we could go to the next slide, that just kind of shows the overview. We are building this to accommodate all of the new development that's occurring. And we feel that there's really a need also on the west side, coming from Longmont, maybe even from Boulder, to hop on our Mustang Express service, going either to the north, to Berthoud, Loveland, and Fort Collins, or going south to Denver. Next slide, please. So this is our initial phase 1 of the project. And what you can see here is an expanded parking lot. So we're expanding the carpool lot to get up to 275 parking spaces. Within that lot, we'll also have EV charging and ADA spots. We'll have bike racks. We're going to have sidewalk improvements to access this new location. And if you look just to the, let's see, I hope everyone can see this, but on the off ramps is where we're putting our Mustang. So we're actually not going to take too much time to get off of the highway. There's no real weaving involved. We'll just bring the bus up, going northbound. The bus will come off of the exit ramp there for State Highway 119. We're adding a new lane there, and it'll be bus only. And we will have a shelter and a parking space for the bus just to pick up people, and then they'll cross over 119 and continue on north. So really not too much of a service disruption or a diversion off of our route. And then on the southbound side, we're actually building a new platform and putting a shelter there on the on-ramp to southbound I-25. And then there's a walk in between, and we'll make some improvements along that way to make it more pleasant for our customers. And we're also, maybe switch to the next slide, please. Thanks. We're also purchasing, we're in the process right now of purchasing property for our eventual move to a center median station. And what that's doing for us right now is also going to help us out with our phase 1 development. Right now, any of the vehicles who use that carpool lot, they can't make a left turn out to head on to State Highway 119. There's no signal there, and it's not safe. So a lot of people are making U-turns. So we're going to acquire this south lot, which will also serve as we'll migrate our parking there for the center median station when the managed lanes project comes through. But we're going to add a road over that with a full movement signalized intersection so that everyone can make a left turn to get back onto I-25. So it's much more safe. That's upcoming. We'll be going to the commission seeking additional funding for that element of this project. But when you see that we are going to the south lot and we have a center median station, we'll be increasing our parking to 380 spaces. We'll also be having an east-west tunnel punching through under I-25. We'll convert the southbound bus stop there to a drop-off, a kiss and ride, if you will. And so it'll be better east-west access. We'll have increased parking, hoping that, we would be able to sell the north lot there since we're migrating from it, and that would spur some development, some TOD on that spot. Currently, CDOT is unable to have commercial activity on their property. So we're going to have a plaza area. I don't know if anyone's had the opportunity to see the Berthoud the Centera Loveland YouTube video. It's quite impressive, and we're going for the same thing here at this location eventually. Currently, we have about $6.8 million in this project for design and construction. We're also including, as Kay said, some new vehicles, as we'll be adding another stop and taking additional riders, and then these access improvements. So all in for this, we're looking at about $11.5 million for the interim location. Sure, I can share that link. And then for the right of way, it's about $3.5 million for that. So we're really excited about this project. One of the things that we'll have to work as a group on is getting connecting transit service so that this can be supported by local transit. Not sure yet if that will be the State Highway 119 BRT coming through. This location is currently outside of RTD's district. And so we've got some work to do there to figure out how we will make the connections to this park and ride. We think that the FEIS showed, I think 580 spaces would be required for this. And I'm sorry, it's not 580 spaces, it's 525 daily boardings in 2035. And so, we won't plan on putting that much parking because we really want people to get here by transit. That's part of our goal, is to get people out of their vehicles and reduce vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions. So looking at that piece, hoping to work with you all on having the local transit connection here. Next slide, please. So right now, we're in the design phase. We're nearing final design of the interim phase 1 location. We have stakeholder meetings upcoming this quarter with Firestone. We've met with them, and we've also got to bring in all of the, Longmont and Boulder County and Weld County. And so we've got a lot of ongoing stakeholder engagement coming up. For this initial phase, CDOT is funding this portion of it. And when we move to the center median station, it is our hope, like we are doing with Berthoud and Lone Tree and Centera Loveland, that we have more stakeholder match in order to build these out. They're a real benefit to the community, and we look forward to working with you all. On this interim location, we plan to complete construction in the spring of 2022. So this is pretty quick turnaround, but like I said, we already have a lot of infrastructure there. It's already a known location. CDOT already owns the property where we're putting the parking, so we're in pretty good shape there.
Good. Thank you so much, Sharon. And I'll just close things out quickly. I know we're running a little behind, but just a few of the things we're working on now, just continuing to flesh out details for all these mobility hub locations that have been identified. I think the new thing on our minds is, if folks haven't noticed, the new federal administration has a lot of multimodal things on their talking points list. So we really want to make sure that we're prepared for any potential stimulus funding or new funding opportunities that crop up, so that we're prepared to throw our hat in the ring. So, really thinking about, what are the small, medium, large options for all these? What might specific evaluation criteria be that would, highlight one location over another, so that we're applying for the right grants for the right locations based on where we think we're going to be most successful with those applications. And then, of course, identifying local partners or complementary projects that are off of that I-25 spine that would help convey that vision for how we're really trying to connect all corners of the state with these mobility options that are aligned with our state goals for greenhouse gases and reducing VMT and making the roads safe for cars and bikes and buses and pedestrians. So that's all that I have. There was a quick question about RNG. The Energy Office is doing an RNG study. We are not quite sure what the potential is for RNG in the state yet, in terms of the ability to supply what we would need. So more to come on that, but it is in the mix.
Great. Thank you so much, Kay and Sharon. We really appreciate your presentation this morning. And I think it helps to show the big picture view of how CDOT's really leaning into innovative mobility and transit. And we have so much interregional travel happening within the Boulder County and the Northwest region that it's really exciting to look at this, and so critical to work together to find a way to link the North I-25 improvements and mobility hub with the East-West 119 bus rapid transit. So we look forward to continuing to work with all of you at CDOT and with RTD and our local communities and commuting solutions partners to move this forward. We are running a little bit behind schedule, and we have two presenters to go, so there's no shortage of exciting topics this morning. That is the for sure. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Mike Silverstein, who is the Executive Director of the Regional Air Quality Council. I have the privilege of serving on the board of the RAC along with Mike and others, and really appreciate the leadership and the work that's happening to bring forward initiatives to address our regional air quality and climate commitment goals and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and then after Mike, we have one more presentation. So please hang with us, and we've got a lot to close out the meeting this morning. So Mike, I'll let you take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Will you be sharing the screen with me, or should I just work off these slides that you have up?
I think it's best if we just run the slide. So if you could say next slide, that would be great.
That'll work. My fantastic animation might get compromised, but that's okay. Why don't we go to the next slide? Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you all today. I'm Mike Silverstein of the Regional Air Quality Council, and talking about a proposal called Employer-Based Trip Reduction Programs. We've been working on this at the RAC for the past, geez, seems like a long time now, 9 months or so, to look at both voluntary and regulatory approaches to reduce commuter trips. And a little bit of background, transportation plays a significant role in our emissions that form ground level ozone. So if you could click maybe twice here. And you could see with the red circles, the transportation share of the vehicle VOC emissions and nitrogen oxide emissions. Those are the two pollutants that work in those hot summer days with sunlight to form ground level ozone, and we violate federal ozone standards, and we have for years. And so we're trying to make improvements, and this is one approach, is to look at vehicle traffic and vehicle emissions to see if there are possibilities for positive gain. Next slide, please, and click it one more time. And we could see also that transportation is a significant contributor to Colorado's greenhouse gas emissions. And as of 2020, transportation has become the largest emission sector for greenhouse gas emissions. So with the state's efforts to reduce its impact on our climate, transportation is a likely area that needs to be addressed for greenhouse gas emissions going forward. Next slide, please. So what is ETRP? You'll hear that acronym over and over. It's employer-based trip reduction programs. As I've said, we violate federal ozone standards. We'll become a severe non-attainment area in 2022 for the older 75 parts per billion ozone standard. There's also a tougher standard of 70 that was adopted in 2015. And of course, if we're violating 75, we're above 70 as well. So we have a lot of work to do to get our emissions down and our ozone concentrations below 70 parts per billion as rapidly as we can. Our air quality isn't actually getting worse, it's getting better, but the standards are getting tougher and tougher over time, and we are above those standards, so we have to make those appropriate reductions to come into compliance. And an aggressive strategy to reduce emission would include an ETRP program. The RAC board has directed our staff and our stakeholders to evaluate numerous strategies, and ETRP is high on that list. And just for a little background, the 1990 Clean Air Act originally required ETRPs for all severe non-attainment areas. That requirement was softened in the mid-1990s to recommended, so it's still an appropriate strategy for our region. Next slide, please. So various approaches have been taken by employers to reduce the employees' commute trips over time using single occupant vehicles, and we know all about these. That's transit use and carpooling and many other strategies. It's encouraged or required by state and local governments around the country, so this isn't new, and this isn't just us doing this or evaluating such a strategy. This has been going on for many, many years by numerous municipalities and regions across the country, both in a voluntary or regulatory fashion. And we've been doing this in our Front Range communities for many years too. Organizations like Dr. Cog and the North Front Range MPO and all of UTMAs have worked to deploy strategies to reduce these SOV trips. And those have been done on a voluntary basis in our region. Next. So the state is now copycatting us, as I would say, and have begun looking hard at this strategy as well to help the state meet its climate goals. So the Air Pollution Control Division is begun to develop an approach for reduced vehicle trips across Colorado as part of the GHG roadmap. And I know you all are familiar with the roadmap in some form or another, but it's really a strategy that is designed to reduce our greenhouse gas emission footprint across the state. Transportation is a key contributor, of course, and there is a rulemaking scheduled in front of the Colorado Air Quality Control Commission coming up here in May, and ETRP is likely on that menu for the state to advance to the AQCC for a rulemaking hearing over the summer. So our work at the RAC is dovetailing appropriately with the state's work, and now we're kind of joining forces in that conversation to explore what ETRP should look like, what are the costs, the benefits, and all of the issues around a regulatory approach. And so that's what we're doing at the RAC, and we're continuing our partnerships with TMAs and all of the local governments to explore the options and the issues for our Front Range region, and the state, of course, is doing that for the larger area that it has primacy for. So, there may be different names: Employee Traffic Reduction Program, Commuter Trip Reduction, ETRP. It's all the same. It's looking at a regulatory approach to see if this is appropriate for the state. Next. So what have we done at the RAC? And so we call it our framework, and it's been, again, under development for some time. So of course, our goal is to reduce emissions, improve air quality by reducing those single occupancy vehicle trips. Who's affected? We're starting with the largest employers, and we've been talking about a 250 or greater work site. The state has looking at all options, and they may go as low as 100 employees at a work site to determine what that appropriate threshold might be. But that's all up in the air right now. It's all on the table for consideration. So what would you do at those 250 sites or 100 plus sites? Well, different strategies. Just simply reduce SOV commuting by 10% beginning next year. One option. We've been working on a different approach at the RAC, looking at no more than 75% of employees commute by SOV beginning 2023. Basically, 1 in 4 employees not drive alone to work on any given day. We've been saying this for years at the RAC. Skip a trip, don't drive to work, or don't drive 1 day a week. We've all heard those messages. So this is kind of in line with that. And then we ratchet down. Once everyone gets used to the plan, gets used to the program, it goes to a 60% standard, or twice a week, do not drive alone to work. And so, next slide, there's lots of administrative issues to make it happen. It requires the employer to develop an employee trip reduction plan within each large employer, businesses, government agencies, etc. Usually, all these programs require or need the appointment of a transportation coordinator on site to help manage what employees do. It's not an employee requirement, it's an employer requirement. And the employers would need to put in place measures that incentivize or encourage employees not to drive alone. And that could be done with an on-site employee or a contractor. And how do you show compliance? You do periodic surveys of employees, and you track that, and you incentivize positive action so that you can meet the goals of the regulation. And there's a lot of outreach that needs to happen. We're reaching out to employers now. We're hoping that you all can help us in reaching out to employers to get them informed and involved in our reg development process, in how do we construct this framework, what recommendations do we make as a RAC, or what the state recommendations are for the Air Quality Control Commission's consideration later this year. And then once we have a reg, if that comes to pass, then how do we outreach to employers to help them comply? What do we do? And what are the issues and options? Are there alternative compliance approaches to this? Are there hardship waivers and exemptions? What are the costs and benefits? How is this enforced? How do we use our local governments, MPOs, consultants, TMAs, TMOs to help? And are there ways to incentivize smaller employers that aren't covered by the rule to participate and join those large employers? Or if large employers overachieve, do they get some sort of bonus or incentives for those good efforts? All these things are under discussion. Next. So just a quick animation here. It kind of wrecked it here. Thanks, Kathleen. But basically, all these things count to comply. Telework and flex schedules. Of course, if you're not working, you're working from home 1 day a week, 5 days a week, all that counts because you're not on the road commuting to work. EV use. If we're all driving EVs, this is an emissions strategy versus a congestion strategy. So if one or more people are driving EVs to work, they're making up for those that aren't doing anything. But we're seeing those emission reductions. So all these things count in coming up with the worksite average. Of course, ride sharing, carpools and van pools, transit use, walking and biking, sick and part-time vacation days count. As long as you're not driving to work by yourself, it all counts. Next. And so here's the timeline. Been working on things since late 2020, really since mid 2020, going to our board with briefings and recommendations this spring. Things will likely move to the Air Quality Control Commission over the summer, whether it's a RAC proposal or a state proposal, or we've joined hands to do this together. Then employers need to prepare for compliance with any kind of regulation. And that's really where the TMAs can be super helpful in this process to get employers ready to provide services, whether at low cost or at no charge, to get them prepared and ready. And then implementation later in 2022, but for sure in 2023. Next. And so more details here, mark your calendars. These are our meeting dates that have been set with the Air Quality Control Commission, with the RAC board. And so those things are important for everyone to be engaged with. Next slide. And these are some of our stakeholder meetings. We're working hard at the RAC to conduct meetings seemingly every week on this topic and get more and more input over time, provide that information to the state. The state is also participating in our stakeholder process. They're conducting their own listening sessions, and all of this is centered around developing a proposal for the Air Quality Control Commission in May. And maybe there's one more slide. More detail here. So I know we don't need to go through these. You'll have these slides available to you. All the information's on our website, and we're looking forward to everyone engaging and giving us feedback, good, bad, ugly, great, whatever that might be. Maybe one more or not. Oh, that's the next speaker. So yep, okay. I know that for questions to the end, we have time. So thank you.
Yep. Mike, thank you so much for your presentation this morning. We really appreciate it. I think what's helpful to see is all of the great work that your team is doing through the Regional Air Quality Council, the partnerships with the Air Quality Control Commission, and it's the combination of these strategies working together to create the co-benefits to serve our region and the Front Range and the metro area. So we think about the work that you're doing and the programmatic side and the partnerships that are so critical, working together with organizations like Commuting Solutions and the other transportation management associations across the region. So this combination of programmatic strategies along with the infrastructure improvements that we talked about earlier this morning, and then the RTD service that we learned about as well. It's putting all of these pieces together. And so last but not least, this morning we have a great real quick presentation by Carly from Fair and Peers to talk about the progress that's been made on the 119 first and final mile, because we all recognize that while the spine is critical and important to move people to and from their destination, it can be that last link in the system that really is the decision point on whether people are able to choose transit or other types of mobility options. So I'm going to turn it over to Carly to be real quick and hit the highlights for us this morning before we need to wrap up. So thanks for staying with us.
Great, thanks, Kathleen. So I'm going to do this at super speed to accommodate our last 10 minutes here of the meeting. So lots of great work that other speakers have presented on along the corridor and in the region that the first and last mile study is going to be building on. So on the next slide, you'll see a little bit of project background. So folks who were on the September membership meeting remember some of the foundational elements, but just to recap what the first and last mile gap is, that's that distance or that lack of facilities between your house and the BRT station, or between the bikeway and your place of work. And that could be a long travel distance, that could be lack of bicycle and pedestrian facilities or a disconnected street network. Regardless of that challenge, this study is looking at how do we make it seamless to travel between your origin destination and the BRT station on the State Highway 119 and the bikeway. So we looked at 5 different categories of recommendations to be able to overcome that gap. step. I'll walk through each of these in greater detail, but high-level overview, we'll talk about bicycle and pedestrian connections, wayfinding, and then specific at the Gun Barrel Station, we'll look at shared parking and microtransit, as well as transportation demand management strategies. So starting off, will be and to inform these recommendations, we've performed robust community engagement. So the study would not have been possible without a really engaged stakeholder committee that met throughout the process to inform these recommendations and identify these key gaps in the existing network. We also took a multi-pronged approach to reaching out to the general public to make sure that the virtual platform wasn't a barrier to hearing from people. So we had 3 virtual town halls, 1 only in Spanish. We had an interactive web map to drop pins and lines to see those specific locations of challenges, an online survey, and then walking audits to identify things that you can't see in Google Maps. So thanks to Phil for pointing out this needed maintenance of low-hanging branches here. So jumping into our recommendations, starting with wayfinding. So we heard from the stakeholder group and through our research on best practices that wayfinding should be really easy to read and understand. So if you're biking, you're moving at a relatively fast speed, there's a lot to absorb. So we created a destination selection guide to pull out those key destinations within close proximity to our identified multi-use path system and near the stations to make sure that folks could access those destinations in an intuitive manner. Those signs should be easy to maintain, and the branding is going to be really important. So the State Highway 119 corridor will have its own unique branding, but it should be connected to the US 36 corridor, future State Highway 7 corridor, and other BRT corridors in the region as well. So we recommended a wayfinding plan for the 3 stations along State Highway 119, kind of in the spine. So at Niwot, State Highway 52, and Gun Barrel, you can see the map on the right. We have little green dots where wayfinding signs recommended, and an extensive table in the plan where you can see for each wayfinding sign, what is the content that should be on that sign? What are those destinations that we want to pinpoint, and how long will it take for a bicyclist or pedestrian to access those destinations? So you can see an example of those signs on the bottom left here. And so the intention is that we're starting off with the basic, it's called MUTCD wayfinding signage that's really standard. And then as that branding's developed, those signs are replaced with the 119 unique branding. So on the next slide, we'll jump into the bicycle and pedestrian connection piece. So we addressed recommendations in 4 different categories that we heard from the general public and stakeholders and know to be really important in creating a connected and convenient bicycle and pedestrian network. So the system should be connected. There's some streets that don't go through, so we want to make sure to identify those bicycle and pedestrian cut-throughs to decrease that out-of-direction travel for people walking. Crossings are really important. Those can be a barrier to walking. 119 itself is a really wide crossing, so how can we make sure that pedestrian signal timing and facilities are present to make that a really comfortable experience for users of all ages and abilities? And it's not just walking across the roadway, but walking along the roadway. So we want separated facilities. We want facilities that are wide enough to accommodate travelers in wheelchairs, which brings us to the next point, that these recommendations should all be accessible. So crossings need tactile pads, and we need to consider users in wheelchairs and mobility devices to be able to make sure that they can travel comfortably as well. So for the top 10 priority stations along the State Highway 119 corridor, we created bicycle and pedestrian recommendations. So we have a map for each of the 10 stations that shows where we need those crossing improvements, where do we need enhancements along segments. And so here's one example of one of those maps in the State Highway 52 area. You can see following each of these maps on the next slide, there's a corresponding table. So a ton of information on that next slide with the table. So the study will have all of this information formatted and clearly displayed, so you can see each of those lines and dots on the map. What is the recommendation? Who needs to be involved in implementation? How much will that cost? Is this an immediate short-term need or a longer-term need? And what are those next steps? If it's a multi-use path, you need to acquire a right-of-way. So really creating this clear path towards implementation to help guide the local jurisdictions to create these connected networks for walking and biking. So now moving on to shared parking. So what shared parking is when we have underutilized parking spaces at nearby businesses to BRT stations. How can we use those spaces instead of building really big park and rides? There's a lot of cost savings to be able to partner with businesses and use their underutilized spaces. So great example of this where RTD already partners with is with a church. So there are lots full on Sunday. We see a lot of commuter demand for parking Monday through Friday. Really great complementary uses that can lower costs, reduce permeable surfaces or impermeable surfaces, and has a lot of benefits to both the business as well as to RTD and local jurisdictions. So in the Gun Barrel area, on the next slide, what we did was we talked to nearby businesses. We looked and saw what are these opportunities to leverage underutilized parking to lower costs and find these environmental benefits as well. So we met with, on the next slide, you can see two businesses, Spectralogic and Hampton Inn, are both located less than a quarter mile from the proposed BRT station in Gun Barrel. And we saw, are there opportunities to create a partnership to designate shared parking locations? And both Spectralogic and Hampton Inn are really excited about partnering in the future with RTD. So what this would do is we could phase the park and ride in at the Gun Barrel station, see what will parking demand be, and maybe not build out that full 100 space lot that was initially proposed in the PEL. So a really great opportunity here that we're excited about. This will also complement our bicycle and pedestrian recommendations. So you can see at Spectralogic, we've got a proposed pedestrian connection that can shorten that access point for people walking from shared parking to the station. We'll also use transportation demand management and wayfinding signage to really make this an intuitive and easy connection for people using shared parking. So now moving on to the microtransit. So similarly, we looked just at the Gun Barrel station. What are those opportunities for maybe on-demand transit? We heard that travel distances can be a little bit further, so potentially not an easy walk, and some people don't feel comfortable biking, and winter weather is a barrier as well. So a really great opportunity, set of destinations to provide an on-demand shuttle. So what this is on your phone, you can request a ride. That ride might not come right away, but within 15 minutes, there'll be a shuttle, not necessarily at your door, but within a few block walk. And so this shuttle will be circulating the Gun Barrel area, connecting the future BRT station with key destinations like Avery Brewing, Celestial Seasoning, some really great Qualcomm, large employers, as well as commercial areas. What we weren't sure is how many people would use this service. So what the first and final mile study did was a forecasting of potential riders. We looked at some peer programs in the area. Many might be familiar with Lone Tree Link. It's a really great, successful example. We looked at how do people currently get to RTD light rail stations and current BRT stations, and how many people would we expect to shift to a microtransit service. We looked at how many people live and work in the area and made some assumptions about those mode splits based off of survey data and lots of great information that Boulder County and City of Boulder were able to provide to us. So on the next slide, you can see the results of that analysis, estimating riders. So we estimate about 20,000 annual riders or 5 to 6 riders an hour. I know that sounds pretty low. So just to provide some perspective, you can see the chart right below this information. We mapped some peer services and how many riders do they get for every hour that they're operating, also called a revenue hour. And we see around 3 or 4 riders per hour is about average for successful and sustainable services. So 5 to 6 riders for every operating hour is quite good and makes for a sustainable and successful service. And then we looked at how much would this cost. We see it costs around $10 to $17 per hour, and this is also good compared to other services from the National Transit Database. I'm running a little late, so I'm going to speed through. So we're recommending a 1-year pilot in this service area. It needs a little future analysis on the operational features. That's something that we see potentially being successful. Lastly, transportation demand management. This has been talked about by others as well, but really great opportunities for expanding Boulder's bike share to be regional, bike parking, as well as enhanced station amenities like Adnana talked about. And then also on the next slide, policy and programs. So like Mike mentioned, working with employers to provide employees with that set of information they need to make informed decisions about travel options. So you can expect on the next slide, draft to go out for public review in April, and then a final plan in the summer. So sorry, there's a lot of information very quickly, but really excited about all the recommendations here and to get feedback from you all on what we've proposed. So thanks, Kathleen, and sorry for taking up a little bit of extra time.
No, that's great. Like I said, there's so much great information to cover. And Carly, thank you for doing the speed version. And to everyone for spending your morning with us this morning. On behalf of Commuting Solutions, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all of our sponsors. I put some information in the chat around some upcoming Commuting Solutions events. The next membership meeting is on April 6th, so please sign up for that, as well as the e-newsletter. And again, a tremendous thank you to all of our presenters this morning from our partners. I mean, to me, the theme throughout all of these conversations this morning has been partnership and collaboration, and really leaning forward into what we can be doing to move forward with mobility solutions for our Northwest region and our community. So thank you all very much, and stay tuned for more information coming up, and we'll be sending out the slides and following up on any questions with you after today. But again, best wishes to Audrey and everything we can do to support her. So